bai vek ule ama khanin problem solving chungchang te kan lo soi to a tin decision making chungchang atlem azong ka lo soi to boka tun chuma hianin decision making kha soi chun som le katum ani a ama ero chu sap tongin tun chuma hi chuanin ti katuma achan chu kan zir lai te zinga mizo chong shethiam lo te an omawangin chu wang chuanin sap tongin kan ti anga chuanin he lecture kan le hetia demonstration kan ti ang chi hi zirlai te ta na ti ani a chuanin decision making po hi cognitive psychology hnuaia omani a Department of Psychology Mizoram University second semester zirlai te ta na ti ani ti kha kan soile du bok ani e chuanin decision making kha ama kan lo soi to ang khanin enge atlang lon kha introductory part ang kha karon soile don ani. So as we had talked about decision making earlier, I'll have a quick glimpse about what decision making is. And decision making refers to the act of evaluating, that is, forming opinions of several alternatives and choosing the one most likely to achieve one or more goals. And common examples may include deciding for whom to vote in an election, what to eat, what to buy, and which institution or college to attend, and such as other things. And so decision making plays a key role in many professions such as public policy, medicine, and management, as well as business. And the related concept of decision making is judgment, and judgment refers to the use of information, often from a variety of sources, to form an evaluation or expectation. And one might imagine that people's judgment determines their choices, though it is not always the case. And decision making has its root back in different from different theories, and theories of decision making were originally developed by philosophers, mathematicians, and economists who focused on how people make choices to achieve often conflicting goals. And following the work of early theories such as John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern and Leonard Savage, a theory called subjective expected utility theory has become particularly influential in the field of decision making and its study. And this theory distinguishes between the decision maker's values, which are otherwise called his or her utilities, and expectations or beliefs. And the key assumption is that people select the opinion that is associated with the highest overall expected utility. And in plain terms, in simple terms, you pick the best option, and so decision making is about figuring out what is the best choice. And expected utility theory and decision theory have focused on normative aspects such as what people should do, whereas behavioral decision theory and the general field of behavioral decision making have focused on descriptive aspects of decision making, which may include that what people actually do to form judgments and make choices. And it is noteworthy that although expected utility theory was derived from economic principles or rational behavior rather than based on studies of human behavior, economists and researchers in many other fields have assumed that the theory also describes actual behavior, and that departures from rational choice would eventually correct themselves based on learning and external forces. And this assumption in turn led to a great deal of behavioral decision research, which has documented a wide range of violations of utility maximization, that is, cases in which people pick something other than what is objectively the best opinion or option. And thus, research findings have often been seen as interesting to the extent that they appear surprising and inconsistent with expected utility theory. Such research has shown that expected utility theory is often inadequate. So, furthermore, the theory does not address many of the key aspects of judgment and decision making, such as the selection of information and opinions to be considered, the manner in which a decision maker might trade off the considered attributes of the options, and the impact of affective and social factors. Moreover, expected utility theory does not address the process of judgment and decision making. And a cognitive scientist named Herbert Simon introduced the concept of bounded rationality, which is an idea that takes into account the fact that people only have a limited cognitive ability to process information. And because of limited processing ability, instead of maximizing utility, that is, picking the objectively best option, people may satisfy, that is, they may choose an option that is good enough, even though it may often not be the overall best. And limited cognitive capacity also implies that people will tend to rely on shortcuts or simplifying strategies, referred to as heuristics that we had also mentioned in problem solving, and which typically produce satisfactory decisions, though in some cases they may produce errors. And despite the initial emphasis on demonstrating violations of rationality and expected utility theory, behavioral decision theory research has become more psychological and process oriented, and thus, following research in social and cognitive psychology, researchers have started manipulations that have designed to provide a better understanding of the processes underlying judgment and choice. And now we'll look on to how judgments and decisions are made. Behavioral research on judgment and decision making has documented numerous violations of normative models that were previously relied upon, and the following discussion briefly reviews a few important examples. And here we have judgment, heuristics, and biases. And the theory of rational choice has assumed that people are generally capable of computing and making unbiased judgments. However, a great deal of research has demonstrated that people's assessments of possibilities or probabilities and values are often inconsistent with basic laws of probability. Going beyond the notion of bounded rationality, psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman advanced three heuristics that play a key role in intuitive judgments of probability magnitudes and frequencies, which are representativeness, availability, and anchoring. And according to the representativeness heuristic, people judge the likelihood that X is a Y based on their assessment of the degree to which X resembles Y. For example, when assessing the likelihood that a student specializes in poetry, people assess the similarity between that student and the prototypical poet, and the availability of heuristic indicates that people assess the frequency and probability of an event or a characteristic based on the ease with which examples come to mind. Say, for example, in one demonstration, a group of respondents estimated the number of 7-letter words in a few book pages that end with ing, whereas a second group estimated the number of 7-letter words with n in the sixth position. Consistent with the availability heuristic, the former estimate was much higher than the latter, even though any 7-letter word that ends with ing necessarily has n in the sixth position. So anchoring refers to a process of assessing values whereby people who start from an anchor tend to end up with a value that is close to the initial anchor. For example, people estimated Mahatma Gandhi lived until the age of 67 after being asked if he died before or after the age of 140, whereas those asked if he had died before or after the age of 9 estimated that he had died at the age of 50. Similar anchoring effects have been observed even when the anchor was clearly arbitrary, such as when people make an estimate by deciding whether the true value is above or below the last 2 digits of their own social security number. And there's another theory which is called the prospect theory, developed by Kahneman and Tversky, and this prospect theory represents an influential, comprehensive attempt to revise and address key violations of the standard expected utility theory. That is, those two researchers tried to formulate a general explanation of the reasons people fail to make the best choice in making decisions, and options are evaluated as gains or losses relative to a reference point, which is to say that is not the absolute effect that matters, but whether the event was positive or negative implications for one's current standing. This has often been applied to money, that the data show that it's not the same to gain 10,000 rupees for a poor person as it is for a rich person, because the gain is much higher for the person whose current wealth is very little. In general, most people tend to be risk adverse for gains and risk seeking for losses, and risk aversion can be thought of like this. Say, for example, a person facing two options, one of which is a surer bet but has a smaller payout compared to the other, which is more uncertain to be obtained but with a larger payout, would be predicted to choose the option that will bring a surer but smaller payout. Risk seeking or risk tolerance is the opposite. So imagine a person facing a choice between two options, one of which is more certain to happen. Prospect theory and many experiments that have tested it have shown that people prefer the larger, riskier loss that has less certainty to happen. Thank you.